Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And now let's welcome Alex from Canada here. You must have ground-shaking, earth-shaking knowledge to have a disclaimer before you start, Alex. And again, to us, it's rather natural, but to many, it's shaking the foundations of the structures of this planet. So thank you very much for joining us today, as usual, and your continued support of this team as you're an integral part of it all.
And thank you so much, Mark. And before I start, audio, visual, check.
Check.
In
we
the
see
mail.
Your screen. Yes.
Welcome, everybody. Beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're only going to be getting half the community for this presentation because the other half is watching Spain in the World Cup. But anyway, they'll be here in a few minutes. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon in North America. And what makes this meeting so powerful is the rest of the community around the world that joins us. And the reason that you're here is to learn more about the teachings of Marin Tavakolikesh. But as you all know, I'm not a scientist, and so we're looking at a different perspective. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute, Teachings on Plasma Science. We have achieved the intermediate level of the EARTHSPACE teachings, and Bountifulness is what we want to examine. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is November the 27th, 2022. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So we've come to the last class in this intermediate series, and it follows other classes that we've kind of outlined as teaching, understanding, knowing, insight. And we stopped off at basic outer space, and we went back to intermediate earth space. And so we'll have to begin a new series next week. But this week we want to talk about the bountifulness on this planet, because there's something very unique about this planet. And for some reason, we're all searching for outer space, but we all came to Earth. And the reason for it is because we all want our little piece of pie in the sky. But this pie is spinning. And so maybe it makes some people dizzy, but it's interesting how we came from a source, as Mr. Kesh described in book number 1, the universal order of creation of matters. But there was an origin of the universe. And how did that happen? And that was described in book number 3, the origin of the universe. And this mimics the origin of the soul, doesn't it? Because our soul is part of the universe, and It's part of the creator. But somehow there has to be a connection. And so in book number 2, The Structure of the Light, explain the link between the two. And so wherever we go, there we are. And wherever we came from, we all individual. But we all came here, and that's the point. And somehow we're all looking for this phantom pie in the sky. And we know that what's something that is phantom is apparent to the senses, but has no substantial existence. So when we're talking about substantial existence, it's something that you can grab a hold of. But we do have senses, and you can't grab a hold of the senses like you can't grab a hold of the energy. But we do have satellites that rotate around the Earth, and sometimes these satellites become spaceships, and these spaceships go between other, shall we say, objects. And we do this at night as well. So we become dream satellites. So we already can do this. And the question then is, you know, when we look at our physical dimension and we ask more questions, and the whole purpose of these teachings is to answer these questions. So I'm sorry about all these questions, but we didn't ask these questions before. At least I didn't, not when I was younger. I thought everybody knew the answer. It was just me that didn't know the answer because I was new to this planet. And then I grew up and those answers weren't answered. And the answer was always, I don't know. So we still have that question, which dimension is the reality dimension? But what we're seeing is that we're in the era of bounty hunters. And that's going to stop. Because the reason that we came here was because we wanted that sentimental pie in the sky. We didn't go to Venus and we didn't go to Mars. We came to Earth. And we knew where Earth was because it was between Venus and Mars. And the Earth was created, it was here before us. And it's bountiful. It was created by the Creator, and it's a bounty creation. And so maybe we came here as bounty hunters. But what's the difference between a bounty hunter and those that are bounty hunted? Because we have both. And when does one become the other? And I guess we need to know the rules of that game, because the rules of that game change on a daily basis, whereas the rules of the universe remain the same. And so this is causing us confusion. And so the most important point for us is from a man's space perspective. Our point of view is what it's all about. And so we have been focusing on the physical manifestation and not understanding the soul manifestation and not understanding the emotional connection. And hopefully we have progressed to the point where we can discuss this in greater detail. And so we're pushing ahead. And so that's the benefit of the mature students. But the new students need to catch up. And we just don't have the gracefulness of time to allow them to catch up over many, many years. They're going to have to really go fast. Because one of the things that they did, like all of us, is they made it to their target range and they hit a bullseye. They came to Earth. And Earth is between this moon space magnetical boundary and the core of the Earth, which is the soul of the Earth, and the range in between. It's based on density. And so we had coming in a magnetosphere, atmosphere, the crust of the Earth, the magmasphere, and down to the core of the Earth. And this also is called our Earth space. And it's related, of course, to the moon and the sun, because Earth space rotates around the sun, but moon space rotates around the Earth. So, what are we doing? And this becomes the ultimate question. And hopefully we can answer that question by going into outer space. But the reality of this is that outer space is not a place. It is a method of energy transfer. And so the reason energy can transfer is because energy is in motion. And so we say that all the time because we have to understand that we are looking for energy transmutation and understanding energy transmutation. So fairly clearly, we understand telephone poles and how they're transition poles that are perpendicular to the surface of the Earth, but the transmission lines follow the surface of the Earth. So now we're at the point where we have to conclude the transmutation becomes the Earth. Well, if transmutation becomes the Earth, then how do we become man space? And so let's carry on with the Earth space understanding because it got here first. And so we look at different plasma planes. I want to say plasma plane, it's a field of reference by axis. And so we have an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis. But they all operate differently. And so this reference is strictly mathematical, as we learn in school. But plasmatically, the y-axis is the vertical axis, and the x-axis is the transmission axis, and the z-axis is the transmutation axis. And as you can see, there's a variety, a tremendous variety. In fact, tremendous is not even accurate. And we found that this is part of our little pie in the sky. But this is a wobble pie because we have two poles, the North Pole and the magnetical North Pole. And the Earth does rotate. And so the magnetical pole has a wider circular reference than the North Pole rotating on the axis. So this becomes a much wider field of reference, and it is this wide field of reference which allows the biodiversity on this planet. But the problem is that there is a plasmatic rotation and there is the Earth's rotation. And so what that means is that our reference has been that the Earth's rotation goes from west to east, and the sun therefore goes from east to west. But this rotation is physical. And then we have a magnetic pole. And as we know with magnets, well, they're pretty physical as well. But the combination of these two in a plasmatic world, we have to understand that there's a plasmatic magnetical and a plasmatic gravitational. And this is the substructure of our existence on this planet. And so when someone asks you how to define plasma, and see if you can do it in 35 seconds, say plasma is a kind of energy state. And our point of view is from the Earth space. But what we have to find is our inner space and the key to the gateway to outer space. And this is very important because it affects our existence. And if that's not important, well, then nothing's important, is it? Except for a World Cup game. But anyway, we have plasma rules. And these plasma rules are universal, where the energy states increase or decrease by at least an order of magnitude, but the key point is that the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. And so this increase or decrease in energy state is manifested as a change, and the result is a natural creation or a natural decay. But there's another kind of energy transfer, and that's catalytic or non-consuming. And the best example of that is our favorite sun, the sun. That's our favorite sun. And we find that the energy transfer rates are higher in a plasma state, also by many orders of magnitude. So the energy coming from the sun is a higher energy state, and it comes to the earth. And so Earth has an opportunity to absorb this plasma energy in the field of the earth. But some plasmas go through the earth, and some plasmas don't even enter into the earth. So plasma is also a barrier of fields. And this is very important, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to have anything. And this becomes a real problem on the earth, because we've come to an existential crisis. The plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. One moment, please. Last week, we found the speed of rotation affects the field strength. So a higher field strength feeds a lower field strength. And because energy is in motion, it can only be held in a field, right? But what is the effect of a stronger field or a weaker field? And so we find that this strength has to be accommodated for by field relations, other fields. And these other fields also have field strengths, of course. And so energy states can change by transcending these multiple energy states. And in fact, it doesn't just transcend one stage at a time. It can go through multiple energy states at any one time. There are no rules as to rate of change, other than change is affected by field strength. And so we find that this is the basis of the creation of the universe. And so when we look on the cover of book number 1, we see that it's one field. And it brings together matter state, dark matter, and antimatter. But the thing is that that's only one reference point. There are multiple reference points, because energy is always in motion. And so therefore, there's a coming from and a going to. And so therefore, you have to have a combination of things. But it's always assumed that energy can flow within a certain energy state. Now we understand that energy can flow between energy states. And in fact, energy can flow between a variety of energy states. And so understanding how this happens is all the skills that we need to understand. And then when we look at the fundamental principle of the twinity here, which is our atom, and we find that there's an electron and a proton, and there's this extreme difference in size. The proton is 1,849 times bigger than an electron, and yet they are in balance. So if we only look at one energy state, we find that this is not working. We have to take into account other things. And so we see that they both rotate, and the speed of the rotation of the plasma of the electron is dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields which are transferred from the large twin plasma of the proton. And so there's an energy motion in between the two. And that's just in the atom. But there are other fields to consider. So for instance, there's the neutron, the initial fundamental plasma. That's a field, and it too rotates. And it goes through a decay process down to the atom, which is the electron-proton combination. And that energy difference is the release of PM ticks, which is a fourth field. And where does that go? We're just launching it into outer space, And there it is. It's gone. So we need to have reference points. We can't just have a launch field. We also have to have a landing field. And these PM ticks go between the two. But not only. We can emit rays. And rays and PM ticks are basically the same thing. But in terms of man-space reference to Earth-space reference, we emit energy, we absorb energy, and we are energy. And all of this motion of energy is done at light speed. We just didn't say it with speed. And so to try and determine this, as we're only at the basic intermediate level of Earth space, we have to understand that there's a plasmatic spectrum of things on this planet. And there's a physicality spectrum of things on this planet. And there's a connection. We call it the covalent bond. But that's the reality dimension, because that's the link between the plasmatic spectrum and the physicality spectrum, which we can't see. And then furthermore, we have the PM ticks, which are the link with the rest of the universe. And so these PM ticks, of course, can also come to Earth space. But not all PM ticks are created the same. And not all PM ticks, shall we say, gravitate to identical PM ticks. In fact, we probably don't have many PM ticks that are identical. They are identical in nature or identical in the majority of references, but they are unique. And they only have to be unique in one category to be unique. And so this is what contributes to the spice of life. And we say, well, there's 8 billion people on this planet and it's overpopulated. And that's only taking into account humanity. And it's not taking enough into account because we find that the sun is constantly feeding. And the feeding to this planet is the immunogen energy that is coming into the atmosphere. And then from that is diluting into our physical reality dimension. And from that physical reality dimension, it is also emitted again. And so energy is constantly in motion. So really, Earth space is fed by these energy feeding packs, and Earth space in turn feeds unspecified locations with energy feeding packs. Because once you get energy, you have more energy to give. So the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. So when you have more energy, you can give that. And in return, that makes you weaker and you get it back. The way we operate on this planet, though, is we want to get it back from the, shall we say, field that we give it to. And that's not the way the universe works, because all things are working in combination. So you can feed one field and get energy back from another field. And so that takes into account things that we normally don't take into account. And so we have to understand that what we attract or repel is not necessarily what is offered. It's only what we choose. And so the energy that we have on this planet is following magnetical plasma rules of attraction and repulsion, which we call gravitational and magnetical field forces. Or we could say that it is a feeding force and a feedback force. if you don't get a feedback, how do you know that you're fed? You remain hungry. And this is a problem on this planet because we're not getting enough feeding. We're not getting enough feeding from the sources that we've had up until now. And that feeding is coming from the PM ticks, which are magnetically feeding to what we call a maggrav condition, which is the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter gen, which, in other words, are the principal matter, transition matter, and the convergence matter. And when it's in balance, it forms a maggrav. But again, it's in singularity. So there has to be a feedback. And from whatever field, which is another maggrav field that is made by the same principal matter, there's an interaction. So these two fields interact, and we call that inertia. And so we have a bit of a problem in the understanding is we have wobbly poles, and we have plasmatic rotation, and we have physical rotation. And so this is this is causing some conflicting attitudes, I guess. And so we as individuals have to make choices. And in a certain sense, I don't want to say unfortunately, but we have to make choices as the last man standing, because those choices are from your point of view. And those choices are based on your knowledge. And so when you don't have the knowledge, sometimes you make the wrong choices, and that causes regret. But it's unfair to have regret, because the worst regret would be not making a choice. When you're forced to make a choice based on what you know, you want to make the best choice. And so that choice was the best choice. Now, it turned out not to be the best choice. And so that gives you more knowledge. So that regret should actually be a joy, because now you have more knowledge. And so we are able to turn on and turn off this feeding and change our strength by increasing the rate of flow or decreasing the rate of flow. And this is all done through the enhancement or the diminishing of the field strength. And as a result of doing that, we affect our positioning. So if we can increase our knowledge, we can change our positioning. And so we find that the universal community is a place of refuge. It's a benevolent universe, because when we harvest the energy of the universe, it's self-enhancing. And too many of us are harvesting the energy from this planet. And of that group, there's too many who are harvesting what we call loose harvesting, which is the consumption through self-serving, energy draining of others. And in that process, it actually becomes a self-consumption. And so that desire is perpetuated, and people have made those choices. And so we find that when these two forces come together, what we talk about creation, sometimes it's just a flash, or it's a glow, or just a glitter. And we ask, is it profitable? And so that's dependent on what we account for or discount for. And is it a blast? Or is it bountifulness? And we've already made our choices, because in the biosphere dimension, we can see that the rotation of the fields is a feedback of a feeding byproduct. And so we have transparent glass, which is silicon-based, that we've made GANs, which is kind of white, and it creates a rotating field with a hole in the center. and we say that Gans has disappeared, but it hasn't really disappeared. It's compressed up against the glass, and that hole is just transparent. But because we don't see anything doesn't mean there's nothing there, because how do you create the hole? You can't create nothing from nothing. You have to create something from something. So it's not nothing, it's just transparent. And it's a kind of energy field. And this is how we operate. So we've seen within the range in the earth space that we have solid, we have liquid, there's water in there, we have atmosphere, there's air, there's Gans, and there's a hole in the Gans. And so all of these are part of our biosphere dimension. Well, can we do this, elsewhere? So we practice with the cups of life to try and find our core space, our inner space, that nebulous point of our existence. And we created CO2 Gans, and calcium Gans, and zinc Gans, and copper Gans, amino acid Gans, and water Gans. But those are only a few Ganses, because we also had the cup of inertia, which is the interaction between the cup of the soul and the cup of the earth, which is the earth space. So we find that our man space is made up of the soul, the magnetical and gravitational fields of emotion and physicality. And it interacted with the plasma fields of the earth and the interaction with the earth, which is another field, you see. It's another field. And so when you put all these fields together, they're all feeding. And which one is the most important field to feed? Well, all the fields are offered. You select which field you absorb, because it's all based on need. And you take what you need, and no more, no less. And you find that all of this has to do with the energy, and that energy is a charge. So we see that charges in motion are emitted and absorbed, and their strength has to do with rotation and speed and strength. And so we look at the core components. We see that the electron and the atom have the same construction. The electron only consists of an electron, and it's a PM tick, whereas the electron proton is a combination, and that's a ray. But they operate the same way. And so when you look at these things, you say, well, is it plasmatic or is it physical? And so this becomes a very, very important question, because the plasmatic effect is at least an order of magnitude stronger than the physical. So when we look at the obstacles that we're facing, and how do we, shall we say, get over these obstacles? If we do it physically, it's the slowest way. If we do it plasmatically, it's at least an order of magnitude faster. So the rate of change would be faster by 10 times. But who says how many orders of magnitude? Because each subsequent order of magnitude is also 10 times. So 2 orders of magnitude would be 10 times 10, or 100. So we have to rationalize this bountifulness and how it's created on this planet, and somehow try and figure out, how do we get this rotating planet to manifest itself in physicality from 2 rotating hemispheres? So to help aid in this understanding, I was fortunate enough to find a turntable that was transparent. So there's a top of this turntable, and there's another turntable on the bottom, which is actually the pedestal. And you can see there's an X in the middle, or crosshairs, and that is the pedestal below the top of the turntable. And in between these two are bearings. And so you're seeing 6 bearings, and I've aligned them on this turntable. And what I'm going to do is put this turntable on a fixed table and rotate the top turntable 180 degrees counterclockwise. So the purple dot at the top is going to be at the bottom. But what I'd like you to do is to see that the bearing, which is at the top, only goes down 90 degrees. Half of the rotation of the top table. And so for reference purposes, I'm suggesting that the arrow is on the west side. And so I'm going to flip the west side over to the east side so that there's no change in the rotating reference. But we're going to look at it from the pedestal side. So there we flip the turntables over east to west. And now you can see the outline of the cross. It is in this transparent turntable, but the pedestal is smaller than the turntable. So the turntable now becomes the pedestal, and the smaller turntable is on top. And we're going to do the same thing as if it was the southern hemisphere. And we're going to rotate it counterclockwise at 180 degrees. And let's see what happens to this bearing. And you'll find that it returns back to the North Pole. And it only went 90 degrees. Again, half the rotation of the pedestal. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I had to turn the turntable counterclockwise and then flip over this turntable and then rotate the pedestal part 180 degrees counterclockwise. And the net result of this bearing was that it didn't move. Well, actually, it did move in this experiment. It just came back to its original point. But when we look at the hemispheric rotation, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere both rotate in a counterclockwise rotation, and they do this at the same time, simultaneously. Which means as the top moves and causes the bearing to want to move, the southern hemisphere moves and prevents the bearing from moving. Well, maybe it doesn't prevent the bearing from moving. Maybe it just moves it back. And maybe this movement is synchronized so that the bearing doesn't even move at all. But what would happen is that that bearing would rotate. So we can see how the northern hemispheric rotation in a plasma field and the southern hemispheric rotation in a plasma field could work together and create another plasma field that is stationary. And then these two fields together manifest into physicality, which rotates. And so we judge our rotation by the sun and say, well, the sun comes from the east and rotates to the west. But the truth is the earth rotates from the west and goes to the east. So it doesn't matter which way is which. It matters that there's one physical rotation. Two plasma fields rotating do not conflict. But if you had two physical fields rotating, they would. And so we've come to an anomaly. And so we see that in our understanding, we have a soul and the soul of the body. And from that, we manifest the physical body. And we didn't say which body. But the anomaly is that the earth rotates, but doesn't walk. Man, on the other hand, does walk, but he doesn't rotate. Not so that we can see. But man walks on earth and rotates with the earth. So man can move by walking on the earth. And man can move in reference to the sun by walking on the earth. But the earth has to move with reference to the sun by orbiting. And so man can move with reference to the moon by walking on the earth. But the moon and the earth cannot walk. So the moon can move with reference to the sun by rotating in an orbital path around the earth. So what exactly is the difference here when we're looking at the field strength? The field strength of the earth is rotating. So when we reference that, we're saying it rotates physically. But we know that there's hemispheric plasma rotation. So there must be a hemispheric plasma rotation in the man. But, you know, if we focused on that, we'd really have a hard time walking. So the difference really is when we're searching for outer space, we have to understand that the manifestation in our physicality is what we call materialization. So the reference with respect to Earth space is whether or not we materialize or dematerialize. But when we're looking at the plasma dimensions, we're looking how to transfer energy from the transparency point to the manifestation point, because we can do both in a plasma state. And now we're finding that our knowledge of that is even stretched further. So we have to understand that when we're looking at the periodic table of elements, the situation becomes quite complex because there's so many of them. And then we find that we are containing every one of these elements. And how is that organized? And who's doing that? And am I being consulted? And how do I do this? Or who taught me how to do this? And when exactly was this taught? And did I have this when I was a baby? And if I did, well, who taught me? Did I pick that up here? Or did I have that before I got here? Because you know, the earth was here before we were, right? So the earth had to materialize before we materialized here. And then when you look at the earth and it's spinning, and some of these elements like copper in Chile and the gold in the Far East, and here's another product, oil, that's in, let's say, the Middle East. They're not scrambled. They're all individual, just like man space. So we have, copper space, gold space, oil space, but they're all location specific, which is the way we were born. We were born specifically in one location. And wherever we are in that location. So regardless of the orbit that the Earth is going around the sun, and regardless of the rotation of the Earth from night to day and day to night, we remain in our position. In other words, when you go to sleep at night without interference from others, you would be in the same bed in the morning. And you would have turned with the Earth. And you wouldn't be dizzy because you are rotating along with the Earth. So if it didn't happen that way, we'd all be scrambled. And then, of course, there's a lot of people out there with scrambled brains, but that's another subject. The point is that these are all specific minerals, and they are in specific locations, and they are exchanging energy the same way that we are. But the difference is we can walk on this planet, but specifically in this case, the gold and copper cannot walk, but the oil can float. So it can move, but it still doesn't walk. And why is this such an important subject? Because it sounds like I'm being very trivial. Because it demonstrates the principles of interaction. And one of the fallacies of the conventional science is that it's a one-way street, and it's not. It's a two-way street. So we see that there's two fields of reference, and when you're looking at one field, it would have two fields of reference. But if you look at two fields, each of those fields would have two fields of reference. What does that mean? That means that the North Pole could be the emission pole, and the South Pole is also an emission pole. And the difference between the field strength of those two emissions is determining whether or not we are emitting or absorbing, and in which direction. And so we find that not only is the Earth rotating around the sun, but it is rotating around its axis. And so all of this energy that's coming in is a binding energy which maintains the field strength of the Earth. But it's coming in from different places to different places. Because even if you have 2 PM ticks coming into Earth, they can't hit the same spot because the target keeps moving. And then when we elevate an energy path, in other words, emit, and we emit more and continue to emit more, then we never emit in the same location because we're on Earth, and the Earth is rotating around the sun. So every time it's emitting in a different location. So therefore, to be specific and say, well, I am going to emit to that particular target, and then I'm going to wait for an absorption from that particular target back to me, well, that's actually virtually impossible because of the fields in motion. And the fact that not only are the fields in motion, but the fields are in plasmatic rotation. And so the plasmatic rotation from there can manifest into a physical rotation or no rotation, or in an opposite rotation. And it all depends on your field of reference. And this is so what's important. So what we find on this planet is that we have this beautiful Magrav feeding dimension on this planet, which is feeding our biodiversity. And so all of this energy is coming in plasmatically. And so what we see is the physical manifestation, which is the materialization of all of these energies coming together in this copious product that all comes from the basic periodic table of elements, which are really the only elements that we're considering on this planet. But elements are elementary, and they are not indicative of energy in motion. They are indicative of energy in motion in the physical reality. So there's other energies in motion. And since all of these energies in motion require a relationship, then we have to understand that as an element, there's an inner space feeding radiance and there's an inner space feedback radiance. And so there's an emission and there's an absorption. And that's representative of the spectrum of the soul. We didn't say which soul. What we're saying is that it's an earth space point within the earth space field. And so the earth space is part of earth space. Man space here is part of earth space. Horizontal space, vertical space, stone space, atmosphere space, these are all part of earth space and the earth space field. So it is from this that we can do a transmission. And so that transmission can remain on earth space, or it can enhance the field strength of earth space, or it can enhance different relationships. So what that means is that the plasma science has to add to the knowledge, because that's going to affect the rate of change. You see, we've only taken two fields, the scientific field and the spiritual field, and we've kept them apart. And both of them have been incomplete. And it's been convenient for those in that field. But it hasn't been convenient for the soul of the earth and the soul of the man. Because when you bring those two fields together, then we understand the full principle interaction. So not only do the individuals have a plasmatic relationship, but other fields, which also have a plasmatic relationship, interact with other fields that have plasmatic relationships. And we don't get to choose which field. We choose the energy, because that energy has to match the energy that we need, and the energy that we give doesn't have to match the energy that we receive. But the energy that we give has to follow universal rules. Otherwise, it won't be absorbed. In fact, the plasma interaction could completely stop, because the plasma interaction follows the universal rules and facilitates the transportation through the reality dimension. And it is this reality dimension that we are doing our outer space travel as the Keshe Foundation. And this is all done through the dynamic plasma dimensions. So the manifestation then is coming from two fields coming together to form another. And the plasma feeding is what leads to this manifestation. So we see the difference. There could be a non-tangible or tangible manifestation, or a non-visible or visible manifestation. But there's another factor that we haven't talked about, and we will be talking about shortly in the future, and that's the emotion of presence, because that also is a manifestation of energy in motion. And so all of this has to do with the launch field and the target field of our choosing. And yet we get to choose that. We get to choose that because there's a physical state and a plasmatic state. And there's a feeding and a feedback in both states. We have relied very heavily on the physical feeding. We are now becoming aware of the plasmatic feeding. And we find that the plasmatic field is an order of magnitude higher. So you have to ask, which is the dominant matter state for you? And then if you're working from the lower to the higher, you're shortchanging yourself. So if we feed from the higher to the lower, that becomes a bargain. And all of this is done within the sun space field. You see, that's the phantom field that we're operating in, and we don't take that into account. We just look at the one space, which is man space. And so man space is sharing energy with the two souls. And there's two emotions and two physicalities as a result. And the earth space, the souls are concentric. And so that also has two emotions and two physicalities and two poles. The interaction is the inertia. And so we found that there are two hemispheres and therefore two fields, and therefore two interactions. But understanding the difference between the sharing of the fields in the man space and the concentric fields in the earth space is the difference between why earth space can rotate and not walk, but man space can walk and doesn't have to rotate. And so not only can we walk, but we can build things. And that becomes a unique quality that the vertical people and the horizontal people don't have. And they share our space. And each of them has a field. And so all of these fields are overlapping. So if we're looking at the range here from the sun to Mars, and we want to go to Mars, well, we find that there's a sun space, as we know. And all of this we're looking at is within the sun space. And part of that sun space is the earth space. And within the earth space is the magnetosphere. And then there's man space rotating with the earth space around the earth. There's the moon space. And you're saying, well, how are we going to get to the Mars space? And maybe we can take a flying saucer, which is also rotating. Or we could take a enhanced spaceship unit and get there the way our souls got here. And that is the soul of the man. The soul of the man, that's the essential you. And the essential you is the interaction manifestation between the plasmagen state and mattergen state. It's the manifestation interaction, not necessarily the materialization. But the soul of the body, that's the surrogate you. That's the interaction between the plasmagen and the environment state. That's the materialization. And so when we look at our physical body, we find that the soul of the man has its location within the brain. when the soul of the body has its location in around the thyroid in two different locations, and they share the energies back and forth. But when you look at the magnetosphere of the Earth and you see that there's a rarefied magnetical peace dome, and what I mean by rarefied, it's in the upper atmosphere, beyond the military range and below the satellite range. So the soul of the Earth body is in this biosphere range. But as things become more dense, we get down to the magma, which is gravitational, and nothing's differentiated there. And as we get closer to the core, that's the vanishing point, and that's where the soul of the Earth is. The soul of the Earth is in the core. So we see the Earth has a core, which is a concentric field within the biosphere range. Is this just a point of view, or is this the reason that the Earth sphere, Earth space, cannot walk and man can? And so when we're looking at the soul of the Earth relationships, all what we take into account is the soul of the man and the soul of the Earth, and the physicality of the Earth body and the physicality of the body. And so we find that the connection for us is the soul of the body, and obviously then the connection for the Earth is the soul of the Earth body. And so we have a soul sequencing for the Earth the same way that we have our soul sequencing. And that is when you have two field forces, they attract another field. And so the soul of the solar system plus the soul of the sun attracts the soul of the Earth. So the soul of the sun is within another field, and they converge into the soul of the Earth. So now that we have a soul of the Earth, it can operate with the soul of the sun and attract the soul of the Earth body. And so it's a good thing we have this manifestation of the physicality of the Earth, because then we'd have our feet firmly planted in midair, and that would be unsettling. But what's even more unsettling is the limitations that we placed on ourselves because of the nuclear science and the limitation of the speed of light. And we find that the ethos of the universe transcends that. And the ethos of the universe is bound by morality, compassion, and courage, to say the least. But these are all factors which pertain to creation. And when we talk about creation, we're talking about life. So we see that the Earth has a life. Just because it can't walk doesn't mean it doesn't have a life. And just because we can walk, we have a life. But we walk vertically and we sleep horizontally, for instance, whereas the vertical people work and sleep vertically, and the horizontal people work and sleep horizontally. The vertical people can't walk, but we can walk. And the horizontal people can walk. So we see that we're in heaven. Everything's come here. It's not just 8 billion. How many souls are on this planet? And they all came here to create the bountifulness of this planet. And we can see some locations where they might have come from. such as Mars or other planets or other solar systems. But in order to get here, they had to travel faster than physical light. And so if it's traveling at physical light, then it's traveling at the same speed as Earth light and Mars light. And we on this planet would be working at a lower energy state because we are manifesting energy at the expense of others who are also operating at a lower energy state. That's not the way the universe works. That's why when you ask, what is the peace dome doing? The peace dome is interacting with the soul of the earth body. And we know where the soul of the core of the earth is. It's at the core. And we know that the soul of the earth interacts with the soul of the earth body. And how do we know that? We're on earth in its physicality. We are in the biosphere of peace, and the earth is bountiful. And we're not the only ones that came here. There's the vertical people and the horizontal people and all sorts of other things that are not necessarily able to walk or to move. And the majority seek and will answer the call of freedom and emancipation because the universe is normal. And so the earth is seeking this freedom and emancipation, and our existence as man is in a crisis. And so our default position should be to the harvest of the plasma energy of the plasma universe. Because the pursuit of happiness has been a launch field failure. Man has never launched a rocket into outer space. And we did a survey of 8 billion people, and the survey says 100% of the souls born prefer the bountifulness of Earth space as opposed to the Mars space. That decision has already been made, you see. And that's the proof of concept. You were born, and you had a preference and a sentimentality to the earth. And where did that sentimentality reside? In the common denominator of the energy fields within you and your soul. And it matched that of the earth space. It did not match that of the Mars space. And the system you used here was the same outer space system. And you were born into the inner space of the earth space. And so the question really becomes, is this just part of the round trip? We came from somewhere, and earth space is one of those stopping points, and then maybe we want to get out of here. But we came here for a variety of reasons. And one of the things is that we are inherently peaceful. And this earth space is inherently peaceful. So this interaction between the man space and the earth space is also inherently peaceful. And this is where the plasma science meets the soul of man for peace. And this is what we're doing. And there are other excitable visitors which are also wanting to come, as in terms of a reverse dreamscape. So all the residents on Earth space welcome other souls. And we wonder which reality dimension did they come from. But these are tourists, and they want to visit heaven and prefer the bountifulness of Earth space. You see, all the residents are fields. All the residents have souls. And as a field, all fields have souls. So, this is the revelation of September 22nd, which has passed. And now we have different choices. We understand that outer space is the transmutation space, and the earth space is the bountiful space. So our inner space is that graceful space that transcends all these different spaces. So let me tell you about the birds and the bees, and the flowers and the trees, and the moon up above, and a thing called love. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science, calling all Earth-based patriots. There's a World's Peace Treaty. Sign it. There's the dotted line. Earth-space has overlapping fields of life with freedom from boundaries or abuse. And the bountiful Earth increases our understanding of the purpose of creation. And so our earthbound physicality and emotional interaction is going through this transformation along with the atmosphere of the earth. And so we're all going through this transmutation from that transparency point to that manifestation point where we can see the bountifulness, which is part of the healing process of the inner space of earth, and connects to that nebulous point of the universal inner space of freedom. The soul of the earth feels the polar shift in man's morality and demands that the plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on earth. So welcome to the outer space age. That's the end of the lesson, and that's the end of this series. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the trip, Bella.
Thank you very much, Alex, again, for being so provocative. I'm not sure if I got all the understandings, probably not. But we've taken a couple of notes, and we thank you again for your dedication to share your understanding with all of us. We can open the floor up. Everyone has a microphone. If someone would like to bring something for Alex, or just in general, or about what we saw today. Alex, you said the sun is non-consuming, but you mean as far as consuming the earth, but it is consuming itself, isn't it? Because eventually the sun will sort of go into this other condition, or burn itself out in a way. I mean, it may take billions of years, but when you say non-consuming, could you explain a little more?
Well, I think from our perspective, if our generation is, not our generation, but our lifespan, let's say for argument's sake, would be 5 or 6 generations. That's around 100 years. And you just said that the sun is exchanging energy over billions of years. Well, that's just a whole different order of magnitude, isn't it?
Okay.
And so for reference sake, you could say that it is a catalyst. But if we were to be in the absolute, there probably is a consumption, because always energy is flowing. So energy is always something as opposed to being something else. The question is, what happens if we change the susceptibility? So if, for instance, we are born as a baby and we grow into adulthood, and so we take in more energy to feed that body. You have to sustain that body, and that feeding is the energy that is being fed. And so that part is consumed. So we have to consume energy. If we say that the consumption of that energy is learning, then the whole purpose of being on this earth space is to learn. The purpose of life is to learn. The question is, what is the purpose? The question is, what is it that we have to learn? And what we have to learn is what life is all about and what is the purpose of creation. And you know, do we have the authority or the audacity to ask the creator, well, what is the purpose? Sometimes if you ask a ruler the purpose, they will cut your head off, because that's the part that's asking the question, and they don't want to answer that question. The creator won't do that. The creator will always show you. And what the creator is showing is the bountifulness of this earth. But it's not scrambled. It's organized. It's not chaotic. It's location specific. And so what does that mean? Then that location is where the healing process is needed. And so the sun is able to heal the earth and continues to heal the earth until such time as the sun fulfills its maturity. And then what happens to the sun? So when you're in the depth of space and you're asking these kind of deep questions, it can be really unnerving, because now no longer do you have your feet firmly planted on terra firma, but you're kind of planted in the middle of nowhere. You're in no man's land, in that nebulous point somewhere in that nebulous sky, and well, it shakes your foundation, doesn't it? But if you have the faith in the creator, and you should have the faith in the creator, because when you look at the bountifulness of the earth, no army has been able to stop the bountifulness of the earth. The oil keeps flowing, the plants keep growing, the horizontal people keep coming, and in variety, and we keep coming. So the creator wants to create. That's the purpose of life. And life is for learning. Learning about life and learning about the creator. And what better place to come than the bountiful earth? I mean, not to be disrespectful, but, you know, it's not that you can't learn anything from Mars. But the one thing that you could learn from Mars is, now I know why I came to Earth in the first place. I mean, if you have a choice. But now we see that it may be possible that there are other places better than Earth space. But there's a need. There's a need on the Earth space, because within this neighborhood, and how big is that neighborhood, right? It's beyond your city limits. It's beyond the solar system. That's our neighborhood. So what we're doing in this earthbound condition in terms of our self-serving is affecting the rest of the neighborhood. And it's delaying our progress. So in the short term, our purpose is to, in concert, go with the healing process of this earth space. Because this earth space has actually called us here. And we have responded. So you can say that the calling is a magnetical force, and you can't decide who you reach. But I'll tell you what, the 8 billion people on this planet have been reached. That's why they were born on the Earth space. So they've already made that decision, and they chose Earth as opposed to Mars. So that was already a done deal. And so why are we, some of us, abusing this bountifulness on this planet and ignoring the heavenly aspect of our Earth? The Earth is a beautiful place. And so when we mess a place up, isn't that what we want to do? Let's leave this place and go to another place and it'll be cleaner. Well, if you mess this place up, which is a bountiful place, and you go to another place, regardless if it's better or worse, the condition or the attitude of abuse to mess that place up still exists. And that's the problem. So we've been put in quarantine so that we don't make any more of a mess. We'll just make a mess in our own home. And fortunately for us, the earth is constantly providing a bounty, and it gets that energy from the sun. The sun is providing a bounty. Okay, so we have a possibility to share in this bounty. We just have to understand that this variety extends beyond humanity. If the man space has a soul, and then the earth space has a soul, then so do the vertical people and the horizontal people. And, you know, what is probably shocking to many is the revelation that even a stone can have a soul. And so how does that affect our understanding of our existence? And this is a really, really important point. And so what I'm trying to conclude here is that there is a difference between the sentient beings. And when we say sentient, we're referring to animals that have thinking capability and emotion and can walk or move independently. But the vertical people can't do that. All they can do is grow. And the earth can't do that. All it can do is rotate. So there are differences, but they're all the same. Those differences in motion are the manifestation of the characteristics of the individual field forces. So if we limit our understanding to only humanity, numerically speaking, yeah, there's one Earth and only 8 billion of us, but there's trillions of other souls on this planet because each component has a soul. And so even if we look at a grain of sand and it has a soul, and how many grains of sand would be in a desert? And I didn't even specify which desert, so it doesn't matter. It becomes a number that is incomprehensible to us in our humanity, and that's fine. But the point is that the relationship of the soul to the soul, the body, and the manifestation thereof, the inertia field, is very specific to the amount of energy that is being absorbed. which means that we as humanity have a real capability of absorbing a lot of energy. And so we could, in fact, go so far as to say that the bountifulness of the humanity is greater than the bountifulness of the earth. And if we come to that realization, then we can see that the bountiful earth really increases our understanding of the purpose of creation, because we're an extension of that. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Josepha in the chat has put, Alex, thank for your sharing. The Earth have the magnetical pole dislocated in relation the Earth core, parentheses, soul of the Earth. Our heart, pump of magnetical fields of physicality, in parentheses, is dislocated in relation of the soul. In KSW 273, Mr. Kesh say about this, and the generation of complex emotion of body of man. Alex, please, would you have any insight to add on this? Maybe I'll have to listen to this comment again to understand it in English. Thanks. I'll read it one more time. The Earth have the magnetical pole dislocated in relation the Earth core, soul of the Earth. Our heart, parentheses, pump of magnetical field of physicality, is dislocated in relation of the soul. In KSW 273, Mr. Kesh say about this, and the generation of complex emotion of body of the man. Would you have any insight to add on this? I know we're going to be discovering a lot of new emotions, just the way we're going to be discovering many more new elements within the body of the man. As Mr. Kesh said, everything on this planet we've assimilated in some way into our structures. But go ahead, Alex, if you have an insight into this, again, the generation of complex emotion of body of man.
And that's exactly what we're talking about today, and how to understand this. And then the reason for it is because of our grounding in the physicality. So it isn't that the magnetic pole is disconnected from the polar axis, because the magnetic pole is physical. We have to understand that the polar axis and the magnetical pole are physical manifestations. But there's a plasmatic field that backs this up. And that plasmatic field works with the plasmatic references of the magnetical and gravitational fields. And that's where the disconnect is. Because the plasmatic magnetical field that is coming to this planet is coming from the universal community. And if we choose not to absorb that, then the only place where we can get this magnetical field from is from within. And not only is it not strong enough in terms of field strength, but the source of it is from another field, which is equally not fully strong. So it's a discount from a discount. And it's not enough. So we crave more. And in the process of craving more, we become liars, cheaters, and you know the rest. So it all becomes self-serving at the expense of others. So self-serving is important because it manifests our physical existence and it feeds our souls, which takes us from childhood to adulthood. And going from childhood to adulthood, as I said before, is not just the physical absorption of additional energy, but it is also has to do with maturity. So, you know, you could have a 10-year-old child to be more mature than a 60-year-old man. And so age and maturity are mutually exclusive. So when the soul is feeding, it is feeding the highest energy from the universe and will never lie and cheat to you because the soul is you. It's the soul of the body that is the surrogate you. In other words, that's the soul that is interacting with the physicality. And it is that is disconnected. So we have been trying in many, many ways to increase that energy. And the only way that we've been able to do that up until now has been through increased field strength through physicality and increased field strength through the emotion. The benefit that we get from the increase in physical and emotional vitality doesn't just come from the additional energy that we get. It also comes from the diminishing of the loss of the energy emotionally and physically. So if you can reduce the amount of emotion that you waste, then you will have more energy. So the rate of change is determined by the rate of healing versus the rate of damage, the rate of hurtfulness, right? And if you can alter that and you can heal faster than you hurt yourself, then you will have an increase in your physical vitality. So that's a given, and not enough of us practice that. What we choose to do rather is to keep feeding our physicality when we find in reality through the plasma science that the vast majority of ailments that we have could be considered psychosomatic. So, which means it comes from the emotional side, but where does the emotion come from? So that comes from the connection of the soul. So if the soul can feed the emotion, then the emotion can feed the physicality. But not only, the soul can also feed directly to the physicality. And we know that because we were born. So the thing is that we now have, because it's after September the 22nd, the ability to also alter that connection. So in other words, to enhance the soul field strength that the soul is occupying. So now we have an additional choice. And that additional choice involves embracing this new technology or staying with the old, shall we say, ignorance, meaning, shall we say, lack of knowledge. And so if we can differentiate between the plasma fields and the physical fields and understand that the plasma fields are at least one order of magnitude stronger, then we can see clearly that the rate of change would be more efficient in a plasmatic state. And so this now really affects my decision as to what is the next series. And so the next series of these classes, hopefully I can start next week, is going to be the advanced EARTHSPACE. And the reason I've said that is strictly because of this question. We need to understand the difference between the physicality and the plasma state. I need to understand the rules of the EARTHSPACE with respect or in regard to the way universal energy transfer is conducted. we see energy transfer on an earth space plane, on a physical plane, in a certain way as we've been taught. But that doesn't mean it's correct. It's just one point of view. And by changing that point of view and understanding, sure, there's a physical manifestation, but what causes that physical manifestation? So yeah, I can cause it with a fist, or I can cause it with laughter. And now we know that we can cause it with love. And this is a really, really big deal. So let's review Earth space in the context of these new energy fields so that we understand properly why we want to change. We don't want to just change and say, oh, I want to change. What good does it mean if I change and I become more, shall we say, spiritual, and everybody around me is still a hooligan? That doesn't really change much. So to change for yourself, you have to change others. And so whether that's done on the physicality or the emotional level, or it's done on the soul level, the point is the same. You give energy at the enhancement of others. And when you give that energy, you will get back energy, but not from the others. You have to get it from other fields. And those other fields are coming from the universe, and they're copious, bountiful, and they manifest themselves on this planet in a bountiful way. And that we can see. So if you're from Missouri and you believe what you can see, then you better believe in the bountifulness of the earth, because it's all around. Great question. Thank you.
Would someone else like to pose a question or a comment or ask for clarification? I wasn't quite following your turntable example and what you were trying to convey there, Alex. Perhaps you can just verbally, quickly, in a way, run through that again? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, I kind of realized I had a problem. Like, I was so excited when I discovered this, because it exactly explained to me how these things were working. So, oh my God, where are they? Let's see.
I know it's in there. I saw it.
Yeah, let's see. So, oh, this is not that far. I'm going too fast. There we are. There we are.
So you talked
Okay.
about turning it upside down, or again, I wasn't really
Well, what's interesting about this
okay.
is that the pedestal is the diameter that is slightly wider than the bearings, and the pedestal is transparent, and the turntable is transparent. So regardless of which side, I'm looking at the same bearings, you see. And so I can turn the top of the table, and then I can flip it over and I can turn the bottom of the table, right? Because both tables are riding on the same bearings. And so I've never had a turntable that I could see the bearings through. The only time we've seen anything that was similar to this was in the Sync Science experiments that Rick ran. But we couldn't see the magnets turning because it was all a blur. They were rotating at an extremely high rate. So this allowed me to do the rotation very, very slowly. So I just line up the North Pole on the turntable with the with one of the bearings, and I rotated it 180 degrees, and I watched the path of the bearing. And so what happened is that the bearing only rotated 90 degrees. Well, where did the other 90 degrees go? So I just flipped the thing over, and I rotated it another 180 degrees, but on the other side, in the same direction, because the North and South Pole rotate in the same direction. It's just your point of view. If you're standing on the North Pole, it's counterclockwise. But if you're standing on the South Pole, it's still counterclockwise. And so what happens is this bearing goes back to where it started from. So technically speaking, this bearing didn't even move. It only moved because I stopped the rotation. I had to rotate the first one, stop, look at where the bearing was, flip it over, rotate the table, move the bearing back, and stop. Well, when the hemispheres of the planet are rotating, they don't stop. They keep rotating because the energy is constantly in motion. So that means the bearing would never move those 90 degrees. It would rotate in place. You see what I'm saying? And so if that bearing rotates in place, it means it is catching the energy from the rotating hemispheres of the top of the table and the bottom of the table. We're doing the same thing. We have a northern hemisphere that's rotating and a southern hemisphere that's rotating. We're not rotating. Wherever you are, and probably where you were an hour from ago, is the same place. But I'll tell you what, the Earth's been rotating at a phenomenal speed. And it's because the rotation of the plasma field of the northern hemisphere and the rotation of the plasma of the southern hemisphere are working together and not conflicting. So there's, no violent storms, and no one's been hurt in the process of that rotation. And we stay in situ, we stay in the same place. So that means if you go to a copper mine and you mine the copper, and then you go to sleep, and then you come back to the copper mine, guess what? It'll still be copper. And guess what? You'll still be you. And guess what? Your home will still be in the same place. So we don't get scrambled because of the rotation. So this bearing stayed in the same place on this turntable. And I thought this was really cool that this transparent turntable was able to see this bearing, whether it was from the top down or from the bottom up, just like the Earth. The only difference, of course, is that this turntable is flat. So I know the flat earthers might get a little bit excited, but the fact of the matter is that we were doing the turning and the rotating. And so when we look at the Earth, it's spherical. And so this turning is all over the place. So you can imagine the chaos that would result as is it turning just on the Earth's axis, or is it turning on the magnetic pole, or is it wobbling? And, imagine you walking down the street and, you'd be wobbling back and forth because of the Earth wobble. You are stable and the Earth is spinning. And this is the most important point, because there's a manifestation in the physicality, and it's very, very accurate. If it wasn't, and you cut your hand and you grow a toe on it, how would you like that, right? Or, if a chicken, lays a hamburger. Life is not confused. Life is very well organized. If a chicken lays an egg today, it'll lay an egg tomorrow. It won't lay an apple or an orange. There's no way. Because, oh, well, the Earth is rotating, so it has different fields of reference. No, the fields of reference remain the same in this space. So if we change the fields of reference, that's a different story. How will that manifest? And so now you understand what this is, the, shall we say, the entrance to the understanding of the new technology of transmutation. Is that a little bit better, Mark?
A little.
You are so tough.
No.
You're a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. Glad you said it. Anyone else want to come in? Thank you, Alex. Again, there's so many steps. Do you think this process of interaction with the cosmic rays, I believe Mr. Kesh said that we would become more enlightened or aware or be able to absorb more knowledge with these interactions of the rays? And again, I don't know how rapidly that would move, but it seems that the team is becoming quite enlightened through this interaction because they're working with it. Even though they don't understand the whole process, they're becoming more enlightened in some way. And would we also, in other words, maybe I would understand you clearer or understand other people better?
Yeah, of course, Mark. And then this is part of the process. That's why, you can buy say a record and listen to it, listen to the music, but that's not going to be satisfactory if that musician that you're listening to puts on a show in your town. You're going to want to go there and say, well, why do I want to go there? I've already heard the music. Well, because there's a difference in the experience. Not only are you getting that experience of being in close proximity to the musician, but all the other people who are in attendance there. And you find that, hey, you're not alone in this. There's other people who enjoy this music, and they paid money to come and see the show. So now you have a collective satisfaction of listening to the music. And there's a buzz in the crowd. Oh, we're all going to see the show, so there's an excitement. Well, that's an excitement that you wouldn't get by listening to that record at home, on your music player. So this is the added dimension that we're missing. We're just looking at the physicality. We need to look at the other field references that we have, and the majority of those field references are plasmatic. They manifest themselves into the physicality. So if we can enlist the services of these plasmatic fields more, then we can enhance our physical and emotional vitality on this planet. And as a result, we become contributors to the emotional and physical vitality of the planet itself. You see. So the planet is giving us bountifulness by giving us an environment that allows the plants to grow, the variety of animals to be here, and even the biodiversity with respect to the human species. So this is what makes life very, very interesting on this planet, and actually contributes to the beauty of this planet. And if we don't have that appreciation, then we're really missing something. And so boils down to understanding. We're only seeing the physicality. We need to see the plasma reality, and then we need to connect to the rest of the plasma reality. And is there much to connect to? Well, yeah, we our Earth space and our position on Earth space is a drop in the drop in the drop in the drop in the bucket, which is a drop in the ocean. And the universe is vast and benevolent and remains to be explored by us in a rather unique way. But we have to take care of some business first. And so this is all part of the teaching on how to do that. And so it's with the advent of the new plasma science that is helping us. And we know we're on the right track because we have excitable visitors who also want to come and share in this experience. They've been watching us all along, and now you want to share in the experience? So something has changed. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you very much. Okay, I hear
I just want,
somebody, Gail.
yeah, with regards to your turntable here, okay, I think if you were interacting with it a little more, kind of showing us, it would be easier for us to understand, because I'm not sure if there are two turntables with a, with the centerpiece kind of holding them together.
That's correct.
Okay, you see,
And
because
they're
I
both,
wasn't sure,
but they're
then
both
I'm
transparent.
okay, so it would help us, I think, if something was moving with you pointing to it, or somehow, making it easier for us to see exactly what that thing is doing and how it looks like.
Okay, so now you understand the difference between motion pictures and photographs.
Yeah, I do, but I mean, if you're looking at the diameter of the smaller, where the cross is, and then the outer plates, I mean, the reason that it only moves 90 degrees is because it's smaller diameter. Is that correct?
No,
No?
it has nothing to do with the diameter because the bearings are the same diameter on both sides.
Yes, but the position of them, excuse me, and the outer part outside of the bearings.
Well, let's
You're
see, that doesn't matter.
Well, where are you actually? Like, I see you've got a beautiful white arrow, and I'm just, because that's what I'm seeing. I'm thinking, is it the position that it's in, or is it something else? I'm not sure.
So what you're seeing here is the bearing has moved 90 degrees,
Yeah.
but the purple dot was at the southern end. So here's the previous picture. The purple dot was on the bottom.
Okay.
And the bearing was on the west side. So I moved the purple dot 180 degrees to the top.
So you turned the table.
I turned the table with my finger, magic finger. And
yeah.
yes, so it went 180 degrees, but the bearing only moved 90 degrees in that same rotation. But because I was doing it with the opposite turntable, the bearing didn't even move from its original spot. It actually came back to its original spot. Now, as you say, if we could do this in motion, then the bottom turntable would constantly be turning counterclockwise. And then if we flip it over, the top of the table would also be turning constantly counterclockwise. So both tables would be rotating at the same time. And because the diameter is the same on both sides of the bearing path, right, the diameter of the bearing does not change, then it wouldn't move. It would just simply, the bearing would just simply turn and not move at all. And that's the point. So if there's a rotation of the field and it's not moving, then I understand how the Earth can rotate and we don't get dizzy. That's all
I
I'm
think
trying to
It's
explain
a
is how
trick
can a plasma,
slide. Come on.
yeah.
I'm going to excuse myself for 60 seconds. Be right back. Thanks.
Well, maybe in
this
your
was
kitchen, maybe in your kitchen you have a lazy Susan, right? So
no.
underneath that platform, oh well, you don't have a modern kitchen, you have to have a lazy
No, I
Susan.
don't.
Okay, well, the thing is that you have a bearing underneath, and you can't see that through the plate. Well, in this case, you can see right through, you can see the bearings, but you can see through on both sides. This demonstration wouldn't have worked if one side was transparent, the other side was solid.
With solid, yeah.
So what was the magic with this when I got this, and it was transparent on both sides, and I said, well, this is cool. Regardless of which side is turning, I can still see the same bearings. And
Yeah. Now you're making me think that I'm going to have to find a way to do a little test on my own. It's very interesting.
well, it it doesn't really matter about the test. What matters is to try and understand how come we're not rotating around the Earth like a satellite. Satellites will orbit around the Earth. How come we're not orbiting?
You mean
Okay.
us as why are our feet on the ground, or you
Yeah,
talking?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Can you, you don't have to, how should I say, wherever you're standing, and if you stood there for 10 minutes, you'd still be standing on the same spot. You wouldn't move 90 degrees left or right because the Earth was moving.
I get it. Okay.
Like, can you imagine that would be kind of freaky, wouldn't it? You're standing
Yeah.
on the street talking to someone, and you see the ground moving below you. The only way that you can see the ground moving below you is if you change your physical reference. You get in a car, guess what? The Earth is going to be moving. Or you get in a plane, yeah, then the Earth would really be moving. But what you wouldn't notice would be the Earth moving around the sun, except for the fact that over a period of time, you'd see the sunshine and then you'd see the darkness.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that you know that the Earth is rotating around the sun. But otherwise, the only thing that you notice is really how fast the Earth is moving as you're flying by. But that's the difference between the physicality and the plasma. Why, when you're flying and, let's say you're flying, 500 miles an hour, and yet traveling from here to Mars only takes a few seconds, because there's a limit to how fast you can go on this planet. But there's no limit to how fast you can go plasmatically.
Well, thinking about going to the moon is a little easier.
Well, only on the pocketbook.
Yeah.
It has to do with supply and demand. No one in 50 years has wanted to go to the moon. So, and everybody wants to go to Mars and terraform Mars and
Well,
insult everybody's intelligence because they can't terraform Earth.
oh gosh. That sort of makes that's a whole another issue. Yeah. No, I like the idea of going to the moon. I like a stop, a relaxing stop and looking
Yeah,
at Earth,
for a visit, right?
and then head out to Mars. No
Yeah,
problem.
no problem, right? And sometimes, when you come back from holidays, you could come back with, two emotions. And then one would be, man, am I ever glad that I'm home? Or the other would, gee, I'm really sorry that I had to leave that place. Maybe we should go move over there. Right?
Well, like on Earth, you have to have a Mars cottage or, something you can use.
Okay, so you're in South Africa, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you move? Why don't you go to I don't know, Egypt?
Oh, that would be great. And then I could visit Yvonne. Oh, shit.
No, I'm talking about moving there permanently.
Yes, yeah, I know. It's okay. I would be totally interested in looking at all the pyramids and everything for a while. And then,
And then
I'd
you'd probably want to come back home.
yeah, yeah. And then visit Peru and, different
Yeah, but
places.
still you'd come back home to South Africa.
Yeah. Even though
And
Canada was my beginning.
oh, Canada was your beginning.
Uh-huh.
You
I'm both.
left Canada?
Yes, it's a little warmer down here.
Oh, this is true. This is true. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the climate here is pretty good. But I'm not a person who feels that any one place is the only place you can stay. I'm interested in everywhere, really.
Yeah. So how can you make a decision without having criteria? If you've
Mm,
never been there, right? Then
yeah.
you really don't know. But this leads us to another question. How can you go to Mars and when you need a connection somehow to go to Mars if you haven't been there? How can you make that connection?
But isn't it that if you're connected, and we all are, to the Creator, I understand that we have all of call it GPS, okay, of everywhere in the universe and the unicos. We've already got
Okay,
that.
you've got that. Okay, cool. But what makes the decision for you to actually go? And you could say emotion, right? But
Curiosity, yeah.
yeah, but is that the determining factor, or is your soul the determining factor?
But isn't it? I mean, the soul has those points. That's what I was implying, because that's our connection to everything in the universe. Our soul is fed and interacts with the universe,
Yeah,
right?
but you wanted to go to Mars. So
Well,
you have to be target specific. So if we're connected to the whole universe and you decide to leave, where are you going to go? I mean, there has to be some way to differentiate where you're going to go.
I probably would ask for something that had a few trees, and I'm
Well,
just saying,
there
you
you
want
go.
something.
You're giving
Yeah.
it criteria, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, so whatever that is, that is not manifest in physicality. Your wish is not manifest in physicality. Your wish is manifest in the plasma state. It is from your plasma state, then you can look for that common denominator with another plasma state. And then at that point, you can decide if you wish to go one step further, and that is to manifest in the physicality.
Yeah, that's another.
But we haven't had this choice before.
So I would try to start in a slow way, because I don't think I would really want to know what I actually look like if I'm not.
I know it's kind of, well,
No, well, some of us, uh, anyway, it's all, I'm just interested. I wouldn't stop not going somewhere because I wasn't
oh,
totally sure. I would try to
yeah.
do something like Avatar. That movie just, wow. It's
Yeah, but I have to throw in a caveat here.
okay.
You don't want to go in danger.
True. Especially when it's a kind of danger you're not too sure of.
Well, you're never going to be sure of it until you experience it, right? So
That's
the
that's a
the
tough one. Yeah.
Well, no, that is the one. That is so. So you have to know what is benevolent and what is dangerous. So if the field connection is not right, then your soul will know that. If to determine
Absolutely.
the correctness of that decision was only from the physical side, well, you're like missing, the whole story. It's like judging a book by its cover, and
And not getting to see the real deal. Mhm.
exactly, and it's the same thing. Like it's like being outside of the stadium and not having the tickets to get inside to see the music. You say, well, I went to the concert, but I didn't hear anything. Did you
Uh,
enjoy the concert? Well, that all depends on your point of view.
well, I stood there. It seems that you didn't have the like we used to have Gordon Lightfoot and all those guys coming to the university town, and there was no room inside, and they would always open the windows and you could stand outside and listen. Yeah. So, but this issue of the fear and that your soul will know, yeah, because that's where the connection is to the Unicos, I guess. So,
Have
and
you
to
ever
people.
gone somewhere and before you get there, change your mind and turn around?
Yes,
Okay, so you listen to your soul because you had no
100%.
you had no justification for turning around otherwise.
I am alive because of that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
And sometimes the answer is not apparent. So we have to sometimes ask ourselves the question, why did that happen? And the answer usually is, oh, it was an accident. But the accidents really don't happen, and it really takes something to condition yourself to accepting that, especially if you've
Mhm.
been conditioned to pass the blame onto others all the time, right?
Mhm.
Oh, that's not my fault. I didn't do that. I only did that because so and so told me to do that. Well, so you abdicated your brain to someone else's brain, and they were connected to something that was dysfunctional. So uh, you're playing the victim. And the thing is, even in the face of disaster, uh, what you consider a disaster could be nothing compared to someone else's disaster. And so if you survive that disaster, so let's say like a car accident, you survive the car accident. Well, there's a silver lining, and you don't even see it because you're looking at the wrecked car, right?
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the wrecked car, then you survived the accident. And so what did that accident teach you? And does that mean you have a tendency to have another accident, or did you now learn something? And so
I
you really
just,
have to
yeah,
look
in
at it
that
that way.
that case, I would probably feel thankful.
Yeah, yeah. But how would you know that difference unless you compare it to someone else who was in an accident and they didn't survive that accident? Then you say, well, they didn't do as well as I did. And so why is that? And so now we come to the point, and like to say, today's teaching is only basic, intermediate earth space, and what you and I are talking about is advanced soul space, right?
Well, yes, and the fact that we hear in Mr. Kesh's workshops, you don't know when your time is. Maybe that was your time to go. And maybe you're alive, like he was explaining, because your soul is not ready to go.
Yeah, and so I ask myself that same question all the time, because if if we can transmute through outer space, and the possibility exists that some of us don't want to come back, because all my life, if there was any kind of discussion And I'm not talking about the capabilities or method. I'm just talking about just any discussion about going into outer space. There was always the consideration to come back, right? Going to outer space is a round trip. Never, ever did I ever consider that going into outer space would be a one-way ticket. Or would that be the back half of a round trip? In other words, coming to Earth was one way, and then leaving Earth was the round trip back. But, you know, as you say, what happens if from that coming to Earth space, you don't go back to where you came from, but you go to another place? Maybe the Earth space is just a, you know, what do you call a stepping stone? Stopover, yeah.
Yeah, like going to Dubai and then going where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, or even Shannon, right? So that's the difference in the point of view. But to have that point of view, you have to know that that point of view is capable. And now, by the teachings of Mr. Kesh, is that it is capable. But you know, a lot of people are still, you know, disbelieving. But what you have to believe is that he has done 460 knowledge seekers workshops, and Rick has moderated 460 knowledge seekers workshops.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay, so there has been a consistency. And so when you look at those who are discussing chaos or inconsistent, and you compare this to consistency and organized thought, and in my way, I'm trying to contribute to that. And it's an important thing to do, because we're only reaching a small percentage of the population. So that means we really have a lot of work to do. And if we do it at the same rate that we've done for the last 460 Thursdays in a row, this is going to take another 12 years. So we don't want to do that.
Are you planning all your workshops now?
Well, I have, but you know, the thing is that I have to plan behind in the jet stream of Mr. Kesh.
Yeah,
I can't go ahead of him because I don't have access to that technology. And you know, the interesting thing that has come about in the last month or so has been that neither does the universal community.
Exactly.
Yeah. So isn't this cool? So
it is interesting.
We're no longer inferior.
Okay, yeah, true.
So for you know, that stupid ego gratification, we could say, oh yeah, well, we're the superior race because now we have technology that the universal community doesn't have. But we didn't even get to enjoy it for, you know, more than a few days maybe, because we already have visitors. They're coming in. Hey, guess what? The humanity did. They discovered ways to do transmutation through outer space. Hey, we'd like to get you some. And so they're here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Personally, I like the idea of the things that I'm really interested in is the earth. I have a very great love, and I want to help, you know, to see that it's healing, I guess you could say. But at the same time, it's nice to think that you're going to travel somewhere and be interested in it, and you will learn from that experience and bring it back with you. And yeah, I just see it as coming and going, and this is like your learning home, and you can take that out and help.
But you need to remember that where you go is also going to be a learning experience for you.
An ordinary experience.
No, and another learning experience.
Oh, learning. Yes, that's why I said, and then you bring back what you learned.
Wow, how cool is that?
I think that would be fun.
Yes, it is fun. And this is why these visitors are so excitable, because, oh, geez, you know, there's something happening on Earth finally.
I think we're blessed to be here now. Very blessed.
Absolutely. And when you look at the situation on a social basis, in the absence of this technology, this would be a horrible place.
There's so much to look forward to.
Yeah, there is. And I'm sure everybody is figuring out that the timeline is December the 21st of
The
2022.
timeline?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that because?
It's we've advanced the technology to such an extent that we can now start to connect the souls to the through the plasma fields, and the individuals can make their decisions based on their well, everybody makes a choice, so either go with the
And it's nice that we have the choice.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. It's echoing what you said. This is a wonderful place, and we have a wonderful opportunity. It's a great time to be alive. And what I'm saying is that the Earth is also grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to visit China where Avatar was filmed, and I didn't even know. I actually wanted to go on some sort of a bicycle trip at one point, make sure that I go on the wall, because my aunt was way back a missionary, and they were just closing the wall, and she said they were in the sedan chair, and she was the smallest person, and they put the money under her chair, and they almost stole her and kept her, but luckily they got her out in time. Very interesting. So I want to see the wall. I want to see what she was talking about.
Okay, so before you made that decision, you had to be aware that that existed.
Yes, that's true.
So that's the sequence. So now that's the sequence in the physicality. And so you can share that with your emotion. But again, that's from the bottom up. So now we have an opportunity is to share the same way, but from the top down. In other words, from the higher field strength to the lower field strength. Do you see that difference?
Yeah. Yes. And that's a big responsibility, isn't it?
That is the responsibility. Yeah. It is a big responsibility, and it's a lot of people don't want to step up to that responsibility. But you look at the panelists here, and it's always the same people.
Well, some of us,
they made a commitment.
And some of us we worry that we don't want to make mistakes, but you can't help but make mistakes sometimes, because that's the way you learn. So, yeah. And then you have to share. And wow, thank you. I like your sheet, the sheet of flowers and everything that you've got here. And that song, yes.
Yeah, everything there is probably flourishing 10 times more than it did the year before. This place, I have littered it with plasma bottles.
Beautiful.
I mean, this is the place where I found a 1 meter tall dandelion. Have you ever seen a 1 meter tall dandelion?
That will happen when the soil is not doing so well. Oh, it's a pioneer. It's a pioneer.
Yeah, but the soil is not doing well, here in Canada, and we don't get dandelions that tall. I mean, if they're more than just 4 fingers high, That's a big dandelion, but
It is a big one. And you're talking about the plasma fields, the plasma water and so on.
that's correct.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. But it is a pioneer just the same.
Well, that's another excitement, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
people like being pioneers and explorers.
You set the pace, you kind of fix the soil for the next level of flowers and trees that are going to come through. Well, actually not trees at the beginning. But once you get trees and very tall grass, you know you've made it.
Yeah, but if you look at this picture and you look at the detail and the variety,
Mhm.
I could never make those decisions.
It
I
is
don't.
amazing. It is
Yeah.
amazing.
So what I'm
Beautiful.
talking about today is who made the decision, and how come, I'm not seeing any fires or smoke coming from here in conflicts, and I don't see any mudslinging. Everything is growing and everything has its space and it's totally compatible.
That's the word, compatible, yeah. I have managed to take out huge number of very invasive exotics, and all the indigenous are coming through. And it's beautiful the way they balance each other.
Yeah. So we're not asking the questions, who made the decision and how was the decision made? And then we look at the science, we say, well, did you know that the North and Southern Hemisphere are rotating at a very fast rate? So you say, well, this is chaos. This is not chaos. This is biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. At its best.
And the sun is shining.
And the
And the,
birds.
and the guy who wrote this song, what was it, 50 years ago?
A long time.
So he's a fortune teller.
Yes, very good. Because the last word has finally arrived. A thing called love.
Which we now know is a plasma energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we're very blessed, I must say. And thank you for putting this and mentioning it. It's really lovely.
Okay, so I don't know what I'm going to do next week. So I'll tell you when we get there.
I'm sure you will be inspired. Thank you very much, Alex, for
Well, thanks
sharing
for your
all this.
contribution, Gail. That is a real pleasure. Your depth of understanding is so welcome, and I hope you have. I hope this contributes to your confidence. And
Yes, it's all adding. There's things I have to go back over, but that's fine.
yeah, don't burden yourself with the specifics. Look at the general trend and see the progress that way.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm glad you're saying to me.
Well, we have to figure out how we're going to explain it to new people, and I'm running into new people all the time, and the challenge is, how am I going to explain, thousands of hours of teaching, and they only give me like a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
and I'm lucky at that point, and then you say, well, that's nice. Good luck with that, and have a nice day. Okay, fine.
I remember when I first started listening to the workshops, I couldn't understand a thing. And I kept thinking, what am I going to do? And then I saw the Understanding Plasma Science, the picture
Yeah.
of the rays coming out. And then I was able to kind of compare that to the earth. Oh, that makes sense. Now I get it. And then once you start magnetic out at the top and then gravity in at the bottom, I mean, that's very simplified, but it helps you get started. And that's where I finally got an idea of what to do. The pictures really helped a lot, I think.
Oh, certainly. And I have to put these pictures together. So, you know, I had to learn how to do that. And in that process, you know, how do I make the decision to put the picture together? So, you know, which comes first, the picture or the idea? Well, you know, the
It
idea still
depends.
comes.
It depends.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, you know, you have a library of pictures and you say, well, why did I put that in the library when, you know, that was years ago, and look how timely it is now.
Absolutely. Fits in.
It fits in. Yeah. That's the point. Thanks a lot, Gail.
And thank
Mark.
you, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. No, I was thinking of the story Mr. Kesh told about rotation of the planet when he wanted to observe it, and he rented a helicopter and told the pilot to hold position. And therefore, if you were in the helicopter, Alex, and I was directly under it, you would see me rotating with the planet, wouldn't you? If
Yes.
the helicopter held position.
Yeah, the helicopter held position with respect to the Earth is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm holding my position with respect to the Earth. So the helicopter and me would be holding the same position also.
Right, but you would see me, if I was below the helicopter, you would see me rotating with the Earth very slowly, apparently. But you would see me moving in one direction or the other, but you would be staying stationary. You'd be holding position. I would be moving with the planet. I think Mr. Kesh ran through that experiment one time. He wanted to observe the rotation or something. The pilot said, "What? Hold position?"
How long did they have to
I don't know.
stay?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, but Mark, what is the reference? The reference would be the sky, wouldn't it?
No, it would be your coordinates on the planet, I would think, once you've lifted off. You would hold that position and watch the Earth rotate underneath you. You'd be in the air. So you'd see the landmass moving. And if I was standing there, I would be moving with it. And I would see
But what's your reference point to holding the position?
whatever the coordinates are where you lift it up vertically.
Yeah, but if the Earth is rotating, the coordinates are rotating.
Maybe. But he had the pilot hold position, so and he was able to see the Earth rotating underneath him. So that was interesting.
I guess I'd have to be there.
Well, we're rotating at 1,600 miles an hour, or 1,600 kilometers, 1,000 miles an hour, I think we're rotating. I was just looking at that. So you would see me moving away from you in one direction or the other, and you would be stationary because you're holding position, but I'm rotating. And that little bit of rotation, it's not very much. I mean, if you divide it by the minutes and hours in the day, and so it's not a big rotation. It's less than a half of an RPM, I think, per minute. Much less. And just an interesting thought I thought I'd add. Anyone else want to come in? I know we're approaching midnight, and our gracious participants from Europe and other areas, it's getting quite late. Alex?
Yeah, can I just add one thing, you know?
Add as many as you'd like.
Okay. When I was in an airplane and I was sitting in the center seat, as a matter of fact, I was at the back, so I had no reference outside. But when the plane was rising, the front of the plane was higher than me. And when the plane was landing, the front of the plane was lower than me. And there was no real reference because I was in the plane and I was landing and rising at the same time. So the question is how did I know that the plane was rising or lowering?
You stumped him. You stumped us again, Alex.
Well, think of the amusement park. And did you ever go into an amusement park and you get into that room that is slanted and you're walking uphill,
Oh yeah.
but it's really just a visual thing?
Like an illusion.
Yeah, like an illusion. They have also, you know, thanks to new printing technology, they've been able to you know, make very detailed prints on different things like, say, carpets. And I'm sure you've seen that carpet with the hole in the middle. And it
Mhm.
was just an imprint, a graphic imprint.
Mhm.
And what was so funny that a cat wouldn't step in the hole.
Right. We've seen these with many chalk drawings on the street or the sidewalk where it looks like there's a hole or there's a pool there and it's just an illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, so
We have a lot to learn in the universe. Again, so many steps and so many hidden things and so many things we're not even aware of yet. And we're not even ready, I guess, to be aware of them. But it'll come in time.
so I want to thank you and the audience for allowing me to present. And I'm going to sign off here and look forward to a really, really important week.
Okay. And is this Mitra's birthday coming up on the 21st? I think that's the winter solstice, right?
Yes, sir.
So is this the birthday of Mitra?
Well, is there any reason to delay things any longer?
Timing, yep. There's a timing factor that everything has to be right. The souls have to be in agreement and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things why things don't manifest as early and often as we wish they would. Because there's a lot of other factors that I think we may not be fully aware of. But yeah,
Well,
I would hope.
we've had a lot of excuses to delay,
Mhm.
and those excuses are off the table.
Yeah, it looks like they're coming on full steam, as Mr. Kesh said now. And especially when we start seeing people being processed, it certainly will make a major, major impact on all of us. Even to, for example, like the former leader in Germany, Merkel. She's suffering, I think, with a condition, and everyone's well aware of that. And if that condition was balanced, processed, it would be quite a testimony for the rest of the world. And I'm sure she's waiting if she hasn't already started her processing. I don't know. She was a close friend, I think, to the foundation, or I don't know what her status is these days. But there are many of the world leaders that are waiting to be processed that were full, you know, some of us, some conditions we are aware of, probably most of the conditions of world leaders we're not aware of. But hopefully once they've been through the system, they will attest to what has actually happened. And this would be a tremendous, or they have children in certain conditions that we're not aware of.
Well, additionally, I'm certain that a lot of members on this panel have also had a personal experience which has changed their outlook somewhat, some more, some less, but we don't know all the things that are happening in the background. We don't need to know.
Right.
We just need to know that the capability is there now, and we're part of that process. Just even talking about like we're doing today. So
just
this is
imagine putting headphones on a coma patient that's been there for a year, 2 years, or however long in a coma, and they wake up. And then another one and another one. Wow. This is what Mr. Kesh is referring to. Just the use of these headphones in a mobile situation will do the processing or the balancing. It may take more than one session, but this is what's happening. And he may do it with thousands at once. That's what I say about the seeds in China. They're going to be directed to put it in a certain location at a certain time, and those seeds will be reversed through the fields. So we're about to see huge technology opened up on this planet. And of course, there'll be a period of denial, of course, but they'll come around as you're seeing more and more of the troops and so on. I was hearing someone on the internet last night, apparently they're a Christian and they're having meetings with their pastor, and they just don't understand how they did all the things they did in war. And the guy, I could tell he was really still struggling. And there's millions of these people all over the world. He said, I can't believe I did the things that I did. How could I do such things? So I was thinking of him and John's units for the military and this brain and emotional balancing devices, which will, again, I don't think the units are going to actually be delivered, but it'll be through the mobile and the headphones. He said, buy a headphone for the priest, buy a headphone for the coma patient, buy a headphone for yourself or your cat. So we're about to experience some huge changes, slow at first, but then of course speeding up as time goes along.
That's exactly right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you all for joining us today. And again, we have this request by Mr. Kesh to fund whatever way you can these two boys for their processing, and we'll achieve that as well. And this will open the door for many, many, many others. And these young fellows will be beautiful testimonies for the foundation. It's all documented, I'm sure, through the doctors, through the parents, and so on. Wow. So we're in for a bigger surprise. There's more surprises, as Mr. Kesh said. We haven't even really begun to open this all up yet, but it's certainly in the works. And thank you all for being part of it and bringing the change.